Justin Matsushita, Matsushita, and Battalion Chief with Santee Fire Department.
Chief, tell us how this presented tonight, and when you were on your way over here, this mobile home was fully involved.
It was, and this is a little bit unique. We had our actual paramedic unit was on their way back from a call earlier, and they were the ones that first called in. They saw a big column of smoke in this area. They self-dispatched themselves and started driving over towards this location, and they were actually on scene within only a minute or two of them noticing that there was a fire. Simultaneously, a couple 911 calls came out, and our units were on scene from the time of dispatch to actually in this facility in 5 minutes.
Tell us what the firefighting efforts consisted of.
Yeah, our crews initially tried to stretch some hand lines to try to extinguish the fire. The unit was pretty well involved by the time we got here. So if you were here earlier, you saw there was quite a few lines that we had to deploy in order to get a handle on this thing. The building did what we call flashed. It flashed over right in front of our eyes. So heavy fire towards the rear of the building. And by the time we actually had our hoses out and ready to put some water on this thing, it flashed, and it became somewhat of a chore for us to try and get a hold of.
The adjoining units appear undamaged at this point?
Yeah, our guys did a fantastic job of protecting the adjacent units on each side. Obviously we want to try and put out the fire and do our best to get inside of the unit, but making sure this thing doesn't get bigger is also one of our very high priorities, and our people that were engaged in this firefight did a great job of that.
Now take us through, once the fire was out and you were able to get inside and go through it thoroughly, what you discovered.
Yeah, unfortunately, we did discover that some remains of what appears to be a female, unknown age at this time, but an adult female, and location was in one of the back bedroom areas. We were able to locate her with the assistance of bomb arson, and they're actively, you can see behind me, they're engaged in an investigation that they're going to do a very thorough job of trying to determine what the cause and origin is, and it will likely go into the early morning hours, the very early morning hours.
Describe, if you would, just briefly a little bit about what an investigation like this, how it proceeds, and how difficult it is, because there is just
that's what makes
amount of damage.
something like this challenging, is just getting access to the actual, back to the area where we found the victim. The floor itself was completely, a majority of the floor inside the building we couldn't walk on, and we had a couple of firefighters that fell through the floor. Fortunately, it wasn't a very long drop, but their feet went through the floor, so we didn't feel comfortable walking around and being too aggressive inside the home after the fire was out. So we're trying to be extremely cautious to make sure that our personnel aren't injured, but at the same time being very meticulous and looking for every sign that we could possibly find as far as why this fire started. And bomb arson's in there doing that right now as we speak. So it's a long process to try and find out what exactly the cause was.
All right. We just went through time change, and
We did.
we're always told to as a reminder to check our smoke alarms and smoke detectors inside the house. I know that is still, in any fire, is always part
Absolutely.
of the investigation, but
Yeah.
let's put that out as another reminder.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, without a doubt, smoke detectors are our first line of defense. We know they work. Check your smoke detectors at least twice a year. We can't state that this was a cause of any lack of smoke detectors or faulty smoke detectors, but it's just a reminder about how fast fire can move, how devastating it can be. And even with us being on scene extremely quickly and having water on this fire, fire moves fast these days, and it was challenging for us to get a hold of this thing. So working smoke detectors are, again, our first line of defense, and the most important thing for us is getting people out of the house. So make sure you check your smoke detectors.
And for folks at home that may not understand the definition of flashover, can you just briefly explain the challenges of that and what it involves?
So flashover essentially is when the entire contents of the home simultaneously ignite. So as I said, when we got on scene, the back portion of the home and some of the vegetation around it was on fire, and within seconds, literally seconds, the entire home was on fire, and you saw fire blowing out the front windows. And when it gets to that level of intensity, it's very difficult to put out. So you saw we ended up having approximately 5 hose lines at one point, and just trying to get a handle on it to the point that we could actually go inside and do an effective search.